Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're going to start in a second. Just take your virtual seat. You can see the presenter is already with us. Okay. Okay, let's start. Once again, hello, everybody, and welcome to the GALA webinar series. My name is Isabella Massardo, and I'm the content strategist here at GALA. For those who don't know yet, GALA is a non-profit trade association connecting and supporting the global language industry. Today, we are going to talk with Marina Lekhina, account manager from AllCorrect, and she'll tell us all about the essential steps of game localization. Before we get to the presentation and the discussion, just few household rules. You are muted, and for now you'll remain so. If you have any technical difficulties, you can let me know by using your chat box, and I will work with you to troubleshoot. If you have a slow internet connection, your audio may be disrupted. If that happens, what you can do is use the number listed in your Zoom invitation to call in using your phone. We'll make a recording of the presentation, and you will be able to find it later on the GALA website tomorrow at the latest. And if you have any questions for Marina, you can type them using the QA box, and we will try to get to as many questions as we have time for until the end of the presentation. And feel free to use the chat box to give feedback, comments, etc. Now, Marina, I'm leaving to you.
Yeah.
Welcome. And you can start the presentation anytime.
Thank you so much, Isabella, for giving your intro. And I'm really happy to see you all guys visiting the presentation, visiting the webinar, which is called Game Localization, Stairway to Success. So yes, my name is Marina, and probably the hardest part of my speech is telling you a few words about myself, but I'll try. So I have been working with AllCorrect for 10 years, and the same amount of years I'm in the industry. And during this time, I've been working as a senior LQA manager, project manager, and now I am at the position of account manager. During my years of managing projects, I have worked on many beautiful big titles like Anthem or Need for Speed Heat and Jedi: The Fallen Order and many others. And so I have gained some experience, which I will gladly share with you guys. So I'm giving a talk about localization today. And prior to diving into the topic, I would like to mention two obvious concepts that contribute the most to players' experience, and they are immersion and flow. For psychologists, the concept of immersion can be defined as the subjective experience of a user to be physically located in a mediated space, although it is just an illusion. And flow is a bit more complicated, though. It can be mixed up with immersion at times, but basically flow is more about challenge activities and a player's ability to successfully overcome those. From a technical standpoint, good flow means that a game is well-balanced and well-designed. Flow and immersion give us that very feeling that makes our bodies and especially our hands shake and move all the sides while pressing the buttons on the controller or gamepad during a gaming session. So every time I see my son jumping up and down on the couch, I know that he's playing his Crash Bandicoot, and I know he goes with the flow, totally immersed into the process. Now you might be wondering, where is localization here? The answer is pretty simple. According to multiple researchers, 50% of money in the video game industry comes from localized versions, which means it is highly important to keep a game as native to any player as possible, be that a localized version or the original one. Because if a game doesn't feel native, immersion can easily be broken and players' experience would suffer a lot from that. So the main idea of any localization process should be keeping the game as native and immersive for any player in the world as it is possible at all. So yes, contents. So today we are going to talk about several must-have steps towards a good localization. And so there are 7 chronological steps to take care of before we actually have a game localized into whatever language. I'll quickly go through them. Step 1 is choosing your markets. Step 2 is planning ahead. You know, good planning makes a big deal of any adventure. Step 3 is about internationalizing your assets. This is quite a big topic, so please be prepared for lots of information here. Step 4 is about making the files nice and at the same time saving your time by preparing the files in proper way for a localizer. Step 5 is about context. As usual, I think no presentation about localization is possible without this very concept of context. Step 6 about localization proper, and step 7 is about enjoying the result. Choosing your markets. Again, we should bear in mind that 50% of money comes from localized versions. But it doesn't mean that we just can randomly pick regions and localize a game into whatever languages we like best. Choosing the right region should be conscious and thorough. But how to do that? It's no wonder that different regions have different preferences in gaming platforms. Like console games are popular in the USA, Japan, and Western Europe. And releasing a PC game, it makes sense to target China, the USA again, and Western and Eastern Europe. And mobile games engage such a vast territory that you'd need to take into account multiple factors to develop your own marketing strategy right. The points for analysis here will include game genre, of course, target audience gender, monetization model, and many other metrics. So first thing to consider before planning localization is to do some research where your supported platforms will work best. By the way, the relevant information about the video game market goings-on can be found on websites like Newzoo and Statista, and some Reddit threads, and some information as well can be found on our AllCorrect website. Then, planning ahead. You know that careful planning is our everything. Careful planning is half of careful management, and so on. So once you are done with choosing your markets, the next thing to do is planning. Now, let's look at the possible stages of game development. The dark blue stages here are usually present. First, you come up with the idea, then you immediately dive into game development, then do some text translation, then build compilation, and there you go, the game is released, and somehow you do not turn a millionaire overnight. Maybe you have forgotten something? Exactly. The light blue stages here are the stages that are frequently forgotten, but it's those very stages that help you target your very own audience. So first thing to do is to run some MVP beta testing. That is to check against some minimal requirements, whether the game build is working, whether the main functionality is at place, and stuff like that. Then choosing your markets, which, as you remember, should be a research in its own. And this very research should include culturalization audit as well. The simplest scenario to run such an audit is to show your game to the representatives of your target audiences. And you might discover that zombies are strictly forbidden in China. Blood and war are not welcome for your chosen age rating in most of the regions. The graphics of characters do not look appealing for the Japanese audience, and the main character, or let's say the main lesbian character, would be the reason to backlash your game in Russia. And then there are yellow stages, which are considered the extra stages. These are voiceovers, the development of expansions and add-ons, translations of voiceovers, and localization QA. And the ones that are present inside these dotted boxes can either be or be not present during the game development cycle. And this only depends on the type of a game. So again, careful planning doesn't take a lot of time or money, but it definitely contributes to the overall success of your release. And we move on. Yes, internationalization. This is a long word that means really a lot. Yeah, this is an area that is seldomly spoken of, but undoubtedly essential. You know, I've come across a metaphor somewhere inside GALA's knowledge base, which says that internationalization is like an underwear, and it is being unnoticed unless you have it on. But once you fail to put it on, you start drawing attention. And this is exactly what happens when internationalization gets ignored. So internationalization is a set of measures undertaken at a very early stage of development. Internationalization makes sure that all the internal resources like menus and character dialogues, multimedia content, etc., including numbers and punctuation and currency symbols, are separated from code. And there are three main areas, you can see them here, to take into consideration. These are user interactions, regional settings, and text itself. So your main goal is to make a player feel your game like it was originally developed in their native region. That's why fonts should look pretty, dates and times and currencies should adjust to local standards, and the texts themselves should be adjustable for all the localizations. Let's look at the examples. Yeah, sometimes it seems that an element will stay the same throughout all the localizations, the same for any language, like a number or a punctuation sign, for example. But just have a look here at the examples. We see that the same, for example, the same question mark behaves differently for different languages, and number formats can go absolutely mad. Yeah, that's kind of definition of madness for a localizer, but still it is in place. So yeah, and the third screenshot, as you can see, this game was localized into German, but somehow this very area stays still in English, because hours in German, please excuse my German, would be Stunde or Stunden. So that's why S should stand here instead of H. And yes, this very segment turned to be hard-coded, and it was really difficult to localize it. almost next to impossible. So please move all translatable strings into separate files called resource files and make the code access those strings when needed. These resource files can be flat text files or databases or even code resources, but they should be completely separated from the main code and should contain nothing but translatable data and maybe some sort of important information for translators. Well, the initial cost of producing internationalized code is somewhat higher than localizing it to a single market, but you only paid once. The cost of simply doing a localization once your code is internationalized is a fraction of a previous cost and avoids considerable cost of maintenance and source code control for multiple code versions. And yes, speaking of that, let me say a few words about Unicode. Character encoding has been a never-ending pain since the creation of binary code. Do you have any ideas why? Because we humans can't read binary. So instead of getting into the weeds, let's get the most important facts about character encoding that you need to know out of the way. Plain text is a fiction. It doesn't exist. Every text has to be encoded. It means that if you have to handle that text, you need to know how it was encoded to make proper sense of it. Yes, everything is encoded in some way, including plain text. Guessing and encoding will not work in any cases. We have Unicode now. Please use that. Everything else is legacy support. Yeah, and speaking about encoding, I should also mention the fonts. Please pay special attention to fonts. The thing is that I have seen a lot of games with beautifully crafted fonts that look just amazing in English. But when those games entered localization phase, and it turned out that a game needed to be localized into, let's say, Portuguese, then it turned out that those beautifully created fonts didn't support particular characters. This is just an example that I have found on the web. I have taken a nice, I suppose it's a nice pixelated font, and I have typed in this phrase, "Eat your greens, it looks good" in English. But once I have tried to type these characters with accents, you see, it just couldn't work. So please make sure to follow the following rules. So when choosing a font, make sure it supports the writing systems of your chosen localization languages, such as the Latin alphabet, including the expanded alphabet, the Cyrillic alphabet, also languages with right to left writing, such as Hebrew and Arabic, also character-based writing systems, such as Chinese and Japanese, and in case you need it, the writing systems of Southeast Asia, India, and so on. Yeah, maybe some of you guys have any question. Isabella, can I ask you to go through the chat and tell me if there are any?
Let's see. Not for now, but they'll come in a minute. So let's keep going.
Right. Thank you. Then, yeah, text length.
Yes, I'm sorry, there is a question.
Sure.
About culturalization.
Yes.
And it's about this game called Jedi Fallen Order. Has got, you know it? Okay.
Yes.
Apparently, Jedi has only one avatar who is male. And how does such a decision get made?
The thing is that we really were working as the main vendor for this very game for Russian. And as far as I remember, Korean. Yes, only these two languages. Well, actually, the state of things on the project was like this. All the localization and, of course, culturalization decisions were taken on the side of electronic arts. So we only had guidelines, we only had rules to follow. And basically, we didn't have enough power to advise doing anything. That's why I just can't tell you guys how this decision was made.
Okay, thank you, Marina.
Thank you, Isabella. So now let's move on. And you remember, guys, we're still talking about internationalization, two long words that are really easy to mix up. So the next thing to discuss is text length. Well, I guess many of you have seen this picture from Elder Scrolls. It's a very painful picture for a German eye. And to avoid things like that, please provide for potential length increase during localization. According to the IBM UI expansion guidelines, depending on the number of characters in the text, the localized text may rise, the size of the localized text may go up to 30 to 200%. So please keep that in mind. Well, yes, internationalization. It is a very hard and tedious process. Different character sets, different average word length, different pluralization rules. There's a lot going on there, and it's next to impossible to test against all possible scenarios. As a side effect, most of us will simply test against one or two known languages and hope for the best. Unfortunately, this often leads to broken UI elements, text going out of bounds, or forgotten and non-translated strings making their way into the release. This usually brings a lot of pain. And in an attempt to ease up the whole process, there are several tools on the web that help to preview your product with pseudo translations in a way that will identify untranslated strings, expand words by doubling all vowels, and use English lookalike UTF-8 characters for readability. This is usually a very short thing to do. It doesn't take a lot of time. Of course, it all depends on the volume of the game, on the volume of text you have at hand, but still, it usually runs quite fast, quite quickly. Okay, and yes, this is also an important thing. Please make sure you will be able to move interface elements in various language versions and have a flexible variable order because syntax and orthography do differ from language to language. Here you can see a screenshot from a game that was originally developed in Chinese, and you see the areas here are pretty small and their size is not adjustable depending on the text length. That's why French localization has suffered here a bit. And yes, regarding the order of variables, the example is as follows. Get something to kill some boss and complete, for example, some level. So if we had this variable order like the same for all the languages, it would be next to impossible, or it would be really hard to translate this segment into Russian, because in Russian, as you can see, first comes this one, the boss, then comes the 0 thing, and last comes the 1 thing. And it is usually the case for most of the languages because they are just different. They are not the same as English. And unfortunately, not all the developers do bear that in mind. And speaking of different optimizations and things to remember, sometimes developers like all kinds of optimizations so much that they overdo. And here is the example of some overdoing of how not better do it. Well, sometimes a developer would just split a large sentence into several segments with the idea that when we translate this sentence consisting of several segments into whatever language and then compose them back, the text will be okay. Well, actually, it won't, because let's see. The example here is win a game on LMAP size on hard difficulty. That's, I suppose, the difficulty mode name. Playing as someone like Jon Snow to unlock. And this very sentence was decomposed into 5 segments. And what you can see highlighted in yellow here are the variables. And the developer just put the variables somewhere else, not on the localization sheet, not inside the localization file, but just put them somewhere in the code so that they would be put where necessary according to English word order. And if we are to translate this sentence into Turkish, the word order would be completely different. Difficulty hard, playing LMAP as Jon Snow to unlock to win. It makes no sense, absolutely no sense. And yeah, this is not the thing to do. Please avoid unnecessary optimization. What else? Yes, this is not so very much important as the previous points, but still it is here, and let it be here. Please store content for localization in convenient formats. It's 2021 now, and everybody works in different CAT tools. And we have the level of, okay, just everybody works in CAT tools. And in any case, a localizer would be able to work with any kind of file format, but it is better to stick to the industry accepted file formats like PO or XLIF. The main idea here is that a localizer is able to handle whatever formats once, but for a smooth work on updates or sudden changes to the source files, it is much better to have bilingual or even multilingual files rather than monolingual ones. This really helps to avoid implementing one and the same fix into all the languages one by one. And yeah, that's my favorite, culturalization. Just imagine that you have come up with a brilliant idea. I'm sorry, there is an upper hut that gets in the way of reading. Yeah, Greek gods versus zombies, and the whole shebang takes place, for example, in Cyprus. If we look at this game concept from the culturalization point of view, from the culturalization perspective, we might receive something like, hey, next slide. Yeah, something like this. Yes, blood and gore can result in the possible backlash of our game in Germany. I'm sorry. Then homosexual relations or any mentioning of LGBT can result in possible backlash in Russia, because this is considered a propaganda, any mentioning. Zombies and undead will result in possible backlash in China, because we have to respect our ancestors. Then multiple gods can result in possible backlash in Muslim countries, because God can be just one, not multiple gods. Nudity can result in possible backlash in Middle East. And gambling and alcohol, again, can be the reason for a backlash in your game in Russia, because propaganda again. And geopolitical imaginations. As you might remember, the whole thing is happening in Cyprus, and Cyprus is considered a very controversial territory. There are still debates regarding what country does the place belong to, either it is Greece or Turkey. So in the end, we might have, I'm sorry, next slide. We might have something like this: censored, 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 everything is censored. So to avoid it, we must take into consideration this kind of culturalization audit at the very early stage of development of our game. So again, what should be avoided? Nudity, homosexual relations, or any LGBT mentioning, graphic depiction of violence, blood and gore, extreme violence, of course, I have forgotten to mention it. And one thing more that I forgot is the unconstitutional organizations like ISIS. Bones and skulls for China, gambling and alcohol for Russia, gods and prophets, that's mainly for Islamic countries, and geopolitical imaginations, also state images and boundaries that can refer to conflicts and some historical events. Okay, let's move on. Yes, finally, we have moved to step number 4, and we have ended talking about internationalization. By the way, Isabella, may I ask you to have a look? I'm sorry, to have a look at the questions.
Sure, there are a couple actually.
Yeah.
So there's one from Paula, and she asks, when it comes to decide what languages to localize a game into, is this a decision that always comes from the client, or do clients sometimes ask localization vendors for an assessment?
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Isabella. This really depends on the team of the client. If it is a big, let's say, AAA company, there are always people who are responsible for taking the decisions of the kind. But, you know, we work with lots of indie developers, and they ask us such questions. And sometimes we give advice. And of course, we take into consideration multiple factors like what the game is, the genre, the target audience, and many things like that. So yes, it only depends on the client. If a client doesn't feel enough knowledge or experience to come up with their own judgment, of course, they can come to a localizer and ask them.
Okay, yes. And then there's a remark from Damien. It's a question, but I feel we all know the answer. Isn't it hard to develop a game that will please every single country? Probably yes.
Yes, it is. It is hard. And speaking of countries, what came to me right now, France, by the way, is the country with the minimum of requirements. I would say that almost everything is possible for French gamers. Yeah, so if you have a game packed with anything that can be censored everywhere else, please go ahead and release your game in France.
Okay, excellent tip. Thank you.
All right, Isabella, is there anything else?
Not for now.
Thank you. Thanks so much. So let's move on. And it was step 4, save your time. Well, previously, this slide was named make files look nice. But then I've decided then that saving your time sounds much better. Yeah, let me just catch up with myself. All right, so you can store your assets in whatever file formats you find convenient, even in the notepad. And just imagine that this notepad file is sent out to a localizer to be localized, of course. And if I was a translator, I would just open up the file and have a look. And what will I see? I will see something that I can hardly understand, like numbers and some strange punctuation signs, then a list of abbreviations, ALPDH, ALPSG, ALPSL. What the hell? Then somebody has shared a new dare. Somebody has shared a new ride. Somebody beats you on something or somewhere. What will I do? First thing is I would start bombarding our developer with questions like, what is this? What is that? And how does it function in the game? I need some context. Please send me some screenshot or whatever. Give me the access to some environment. I can see how this works. Well, actually, answering all those questions takes a lot of time for developer or publisher, okay, for client. And to avoid things like that, all the relevant information can be put inside the localization file. So what kind of information can be put there? I suppose putting the ID column is the most frequent. Actually, this column with IDs is not very self-explanatory, but I have seen a lot of IDs that are great for guessing the context. Like, for example, the ID can sound like enter_dungeon. So this way, a localizer, a translator would understand where this action is happening and what is happening. And of course, they will find the most suitable version for localizing this or that segment. What else can you put on the file? You can do like this. You can just insert a comment column and tell your localizer not to localize this, for example. You can also put some character limits. That is very important, especially for mobile development, because mobiles are small and you have to do some tricks to put all the necessary text into those small buttons and areas. Also, we can put some explanation of what the text here means. For example, 0 placeholder means the activity name, 1 is the sport name. So a translator understands clearly what's happening and how to translate it the best way. Also, you can put, for example, there that this is a product placement. Please do not translate that, and so on. So all the relevant information that you have at hand can be tucked into this kind of comment column. And that is definitely something that will make a localizer happy. Then, adding context. I believe those stories about lacking context are very well known. So I won't dwell on the importance of context again. I will just tell you a story. This is a true story that happened last year. A client brought a game, and it was a huge Chinese MMO game that had to be translated from English into German. The volume was 600,000 words, and the time frame was just 1 month. Just for your reference, some reference information, one translator is capable of translating 1.7 to 2,000 words per day. And of course, here we had to assemble a big team, and that was the team that had to be very carefully managed. But still, 1 month, 600,000 words. And as for the context, we were provided with none but the game build. Of course, we could launch the game and see what was happening inside the game. But anyway, the number of questions that translators raised during 1 week, during the first week, was 1,000. And all the client could answer is just, why won't you guys just play the game? And all the answers are in there. Just find them. Well, this is not because of the deadlines only, but simply because of the fact that not each and every segment for translation, not each and every line can be easily reached inside a game. That's why preparing all sorts of reference, all sorts of pictures, character Bible, description of mechanics, how the game works, maps of locations, whatever, everything is really important. Context is never too much for a translator. And we finally move on to step number 6. This is about localizing a game proper. Now here goes a rough localization plan for one project. As you can see, it starts way before and lasts way longer than actual translation. The actual translation here is at stage 8 through 9 and 10, where it begins here, then 10% completed text approved, and project is submitted. Now let me quickly run through this plan. So it all begins here with the request coming our way. So we receive a request, then we give some estimation of the project, then we get the teams acquainted, we assemble teams on our side, and of course we get to know people on the client side better, like who is responsible for this and that and so on. Then we sign a contract and turn to this stage. It is very important. It is about approval of localization specification. I will tell you a few words about it just a bit later. And now some financial stuff, workflow confirmed with both sides, the client side and the localizer's side. Then we begin. Then we deliver 10% of translated text. Why, by the way, why do we do that? This is a really important, really useful practice. Because when we deliver a 10% of translated text, a developer is able to implement those translated texts and see how the localizations work, whether they function at all, whether the fonts look nice or not, or maybe give us some feedback regarding the overall style even. So by the end of the project, we would bear in mind all the requirements of a developer and implement them into the fully delivered product. Then we submit a project, then localizations get tested. This is not always followed. Not every game developer can afford that, but still it is good when LQA is at place. Then after we come up with a list of localization bugs, we have to fix them and implement changes and revisit the text. Finally, the game is released on new markets. Then after that, some updates and add-ons are possible. And in the end, we usually run a meeting that can be called a kind of post-mortem, where we discuss what was good and what was bad and what could have been better and what shall we improve next time while working together on next project, for example. This is a useful thing to do. It helps to look back and analyze all the flaws, if there were any, and come up with maybe some new schemes, new things to implement. Yes, I forgot to mention that this is a kind of roadmap that we at AllCorrect use, and different localizers, of course, can work differently. Yeah, and what is really important here is localization specification. And I would like to say a few words about it. So prior to kicking off any project, we usually ask our client to have a quick conference call with us to discuss all the requirements for this, for localization of this very game. During the call, we fill in the file with localization specifications and create a style guide for our teams based on this specifications file. Specifications usually refer to language-specific and industry-specific notions like preferences to style and limitations for string length, and whether we can or cannot use abbreviations like here approx instead of approximately when the UI elements are small and we should do something to fit everything in. Also, the mode of address to the player, like it can be formal or informal or polite informal. I know that this is not relevant for English language because in English we only have the pronoun you, but for Russian, Italian, French, Portuguese, and many other languages, German, the pronoun you can be of 2 or more types. And we have to decide what shall we use further on. Also, we agree on capitalization requirements because the rules of capitalization are different for different languages. And sometimes a developer would want to have all the, for example, button names capitalized for all words. This is the rule for English. And for example, for Russian, this rule won't work because we only capitalize the first word and then we go with small letters. And this is also something that we have to discuss before kicking off a project. Also, we talk about using the profane language, swearings, because what we can do here, we can make it milder. I mean, we can use the euphemisms instead of F-bombs and things like that. Or on the contrary, we can make it, let's say, brighter, more vivid, more freaky. And sometimes a developer would go with this option, by the way. The example that is on my mind right now is Cyberpunk. It wasn't our project, no way, but I just know how it looks like in Russian. And in Russian, it is so very much stuffed with swear words that sometimes it seems that it is too much. For some audiences, it's okay. You know, like teenagers, they are they very, very, very fond of this type of language. And they say, yay, cyberpunk, it is cool. But I suppose that it could have been just a little less of that. Yeah. And of course, with the references to sex and violence, it's the same thing. We can make them milder or we can brighten them up. It is also up to a client only. And there are many more things to discuss, like age rating and many more stuff. Much more stuff, I'm sorry. Yes, after we have approved localization specifications, we have to confirm workflow. Confirming a workflow is a thing that mainly depends on the localization process that have been planned, as well as the quality of the planning is also important. So the main limitations during translation are the following. One translation, as I mentioned before, can provide a high quality translation of about 1.7 to 2,000 words per day. And an editor can edit up to 3,000 to 4,000 words a day. And what else should be taken into consideration? Well, today's everything should be taken into consideration. Okay, I'm sorry. That translators and editors can be located in different time zones, and it takes time sometimes to synchronize them. And yeah, mind LQA, language quality assurance. So LQA is one of those steps that are frequently forgotten, and the reasons are obvious. Many developers think that choosing a professional translator is quite enough to have high quality localizations, but actually this is not quite so. A translation might be brilliant in its own, but it might look completely off in the game. It's like when you hear some phrase that is out of context, you might totally misunderstand its meaning, even in your own language. So the main goal of LQA is to see whether the localized versions look and sound native and nothing distracts a player from their gaming experience. And here again, we have some limitations. Of course, testers have different time zones. That's only natural because they are all natives and they live in different regions. Having a test plan. Having a test plan is a great thing, and it is, I would say, it's a must-have during localization QA. But sometimes a developer cannot provide any. Sometimes they would just say, please go through the game for like first 2 or 3 hours to have some general picture of how the game can be perceived by a player. But anyway, having a test plan is a good thing. It helps to save a lot of time, just like having a cheat system, because having no cheat codes during localization QA means we can test a game forever. The testing can be endless. So yes, if you want to run a round of LQA, please take care of having a cheat system. And also, testers spend time not only playing the game, but also making corrections and filling in bug reports. And in order to keep testers focused, the amount of time dedicated purely to testing without factoring in the time it takes to make corrections and file reports should not exceed 5 hours. After 5 hours a day, after 5 hours of playing or testing a game, any brain becomes kind of fuzzy, and it is better to stop after 5 hours of playing. So, looks like I've reached the end of my presentation. Yeah. And to wrap things up, I'd like to get back to what I've started with, immersion and flow. Of course, there are lots of people and processes involved into localization, but if they all work in sync, if they all work as a single mechanism, they are sure to create an immersive reality, no matter what language that reality speaks. So now, this is a wrap. Thank you for having me today, and please stay calm and always provide context. Questions?
Thank you, Marina. That was great. I see already messages coming.
Sure.
So we have a question about pseudo-localization from Anastasia. And she asks whether it is used only as by localizers, or is it also used by game developers? And she adds both sides. Okay, because she adds it often happens in software development. We as localizers have to deal with predefined string length based on English, and it's hard to stick to it while localizing into Vietnamese or Indonesian and exotic languages. So
exactly. So yeah, so both sides can use it. We sometimes use it here, but most of our clients use it on their side. So yeah.
Okay, another question, I can see it here. Okay, this is from Ibrahim. How often do you need to educate the client about localization? In other words, how much do your clients know about localization? or do they trust you blindly?
I just love this question because one of my responsibilities as an account manager is welcoming new clients and letting them know how we work so that they could be sure of the quality of the localizations they will receive. And in the process of telling them how we work, I gradually try to stick these pieces of knowledge into the body of a client so that they would learn about pseudo-localization and culturalization and all the stuff that they need to know. So yes, if we have this, if we have the chance to do it, we will do it by all means.
In a very subtle way. Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. Another question from Yuri. What are the most effective localization tools or platforms you have used or you're using?
Yuri, I think I need some kind of clarification. By saying platforms, you mean things like Crowdin or CAT tools like MemoQ?
Probably cloud tools, cloud CAT tools.
We are very big fans of MemoQ. We try to only work with it, but of course, if the need arises, we can work in Trados as well, and SmartCut and several more.
I think the term is, I think the term is you're technology agnostic, basically. You can use all tools, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
Another question about cyberpunk, which apparently has made an impression. It's interesting, writes Bowen. It's interesting to see they develop similar fonts for different locales. So the question is, who is responsible for fonts in games? Game developers or game localizers?
I would say both. But what I should also say here is that CD Projekt Red is a studio which has totally unique approach towards going into different markets, into foreign markets. Their work is so very sophisticated. They think about every single tiny detail regarding localizations. And I don't work on their side. I don't know how exactly they do it with fonts, but I know for sure that those guys, they are really fans of what they do, and everything they do is very detailed and thought over.
Okay. And one other question from Damien. He asks, what is, according to you, of course, the most complicated language to localize a game in, or what region is the most difficult?
I would say it's right to left languages are the most challenging, because firstly, not all the platforms, not all the CAT tools are really adapted for localizing from, let's say, English into Arabic or Hebrew. And many problems are encountered on the way. And moreover, I suppose that those right to left languages should be both localized and checked and given some localization support by the native and agencies that work in those regions. Because yes, there are like cool agencies working here in this part of the world, in the European and American part of the world, but there are only a few people who not only who do not know Arabic or Hebrew, but at least are capable of dividing a sentence into separate words. So for me, it's right to left languages, and for most my colleagues who I know, right to left is something very difficult to handle.
Thank you so much, Marina. I feel we have to stop here, but it was a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much for this webinar.
Thank you, Isabella, for having me today. And thank you everyone for attending this webinar. It was really nice to talk to you.
And yes, thank you to all attendees for participating and for asking questions, of course. And we would appreciate it if you could take just a minute to give us your feedback on today's sessions using the post-event survey. And one small reminder, next week, there's not going to be a GALA webinar, but there's going to be a GALA conference. 3 days, full packed with presentations, knowledge fest, panel discussions. So I invite you to go to the GALA website and take a look. And if you fancy, just register and join us. And for now, I wish you all a very good evening or a very good day, depending on where you are. And I'll see you maybe in 2 weeks' time for another GALA webinar. Thank you again, Marina. Bye, everyone.
Thank you and bye-bye.
Bye.